Hey guys, Pastor Hannah here, and welcome back to our series called Forever. Now, as we get started, I want to know, is there a game that you know that just takes forever to play? And are you the kind of person who maybe plays a board game that takes a long time and you just love it and you're so into it? Or you're the person sitting there going, when will this ever end? For me, I am definitely the second person. I really don't like long board games that feel like they take forever. Monopoly, Risk, Settlers of Catan, I just hate them. Why don't we take a second and answer this question right now? What is something else in your life that feels like it takes forever? You know, there are a lot of things in life that can feel like they're taking forever. And sometimes it can be a lot harder to wait for those things than it is just waiting to get through a board game. Maybe you're waiting for something to arrive in the mail that you really wanted. Maybe something you ordered on Amazon like before the pandemic and finally it's on its way. Maybe you're waiting for the pandemic to be over. Maybe you're waiting just to get through junior high so that can be over and you can move on to high school. When we're waiting for something for a long time, it can be really easy to feel defeated or hopeless, like that thing is never going to come. It might be taking forever to do things right now, like see your family or go to the places that you really want to go. And in times when it starts to feel hopeless, that can be really disappointing. It can be frustrating. It can make us feel angry. So let's take a minute right now and talk about this question. What are some of the reasons that someone might feel hopeless? I know for me personally, I've had a few times in my life when I felt really hopeless. One time that I felt really hopeless was in university. I was graduating, but my parents had moved away. I started to feel a lot of anxiety, and there were times when my anxiety was so bad that I wasn't sleeping and I wasn't able to go to class, and I felt really hopeless in those situations. I even had people praying for me that my anxiety would go away, and it didn't go away right away. And for me, it felt like, God, you coming to save me from this anxiety, or you coming to relieve me from this, it feels like it's taking forever. And this is confusing for me, and I feel defeated, and I feel hopeless. Last week, we talked about some of the events around Jesus' death and how many of Jesus' followers were full of doubts when Jesus was arrested and when he died. Questions and fears that they had in their minds because their savior and their leader had been killed. Their lives probably felt hopeless too. And especially for them, where Jesus had been the one that they had been waiting for what seemed like forever. To have him die on a cross must have felt really confusing. It must have felt super hopeless. Today we're going to pick one of those characters, Mary, who was the first to arrive at the tomb, if you remember from last week, and talk about, even amidst all of her darkness and her doubt, how she found hope. Now, Mary was one of Jesus' followers. She was kind of one of the original people who followed him around. He had given her a new life and a new purpose. And following Jesus, her entire life had changed. So you can imagine how hopeless she felt and how devastated she was when Jesus died. In fact, I'm going to read to you right now. This is John 20:11-18. Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They've taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they've put him." At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it that you're looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." And Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned towards him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. And Jesus said, "Don't hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." And Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them all that he had said to her. I have a question for you now. Who is someone who you know you would recognize if they walked into the room instantly? Maybe a sibling, or your mom or dad, or a friend, or maybe a celebrity, but we all have people in our lives that we know well enough that if they were to walk into the room, we would instantly recognize them. Now, Mary assumed that Jesus' body was stolen because what else could explain why the tomb was empty? And because she thought this, she began to cry. And as she was crying, someone asked her, "Why? Mary, why are you crying?" And she thought that the voice belonged to the gardener. But when the man said her name, she realized who it was. Of course, it was Jesus. He was alive. Mary had been so wrapped up in her grief and feeling hopeless that she hadn't realized that Jesus had been with her there the whole time. Mary didn't recognize Jesus or the hope that he was bringing to her at first, but that didn't stop Jesus. He didn't say, "Well, she doesn't recognize me, so I guess I'm going to move on to someone else." And he didn't get mad at her and say, "Mary, how dare you not recognize me?" He was actually gentle and kind. Sometimes, guys, when we feel hopeless, we don't even recognize Jesus, even though he is standing right beside us, even though he is with us. Have you ever been in a really bad storm or a blizzard or have it be really foggy and you can't even see what's in front of you? I know I had a day like that the other day here where it was so snowy and the wind was blowing that we were driving and we couldn't even see like 2 feet in front of us. It was like our car was driving into a whiteout. And that can sometimes happen with Jesus too. Picture the snow as some of the difficulties that we're going through, and we're not always able to see that Jesus is with us. Just like we might not be able to see the road as it's ahead of us, even though we know that it's there. Sometimes when we're feeling hopeless, we can even forget to look for Jesus because we can be preoccupied, feeling really sad or feeling really angry, which is okay, but those aren't the places that Jesus wants us to stay. For me, when I had a really hopeless time in my life, when I was going through that anxiety, I sometimes felt like that, like I didn't know where Jesus was. Like I was driving through a whiteout and I couldn't see if he was ahead of me or with me or not. But eventually, through the help of friends and family and through some other tools and support networks, I was able to see clearly that God was with me. And I knew that God had been with me the whole time. It had just been really hard for me to see. And sometimes when I'm going through difficult times in my life now, I look back on that time and I remind myself, remember Hannah, when you thought that God wasn't with you and you were in a really dark place where it felt like there was no hope? But then God showed up. He showed up just when I needed him. And it reminds me that Jesus is with us this whole time and that we can trust him. We can depend on him and he is our hope. Let's take time to answer another question now. When Mary felt hopeless, how did Jesus respond to her? Pick a few words that you would use to describe this interaction. You know, Jesus' appearance to Mary gives us clues about the kind of hope that Jesus gives us. It's not a temporary, here one day and gone the next kind of hope, but it's a kind of hope that lasts, even through doubt and uncertainty. It's a hope that's based on his ability to conquer death. Because if he can beat death, really there's nothing that Jesus can't do. It's a hope that's based on his great love for us, that he loved us enough to die for us, and he loves us enough to show up for us and comfort us, even when we need a glimpse of hope. So when we're feeling hopeless, can we expect that Jesus is going to show up for us just in the flesh like he did to Mary? Well, probably not. But listen to this verse from Ephesians 1:18. I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened, in order that you may know the hope to which he has called you, the riches of his glorious inheritance in his holy people. Now this verse is telling us that we might not be able to see Jesus physically with our own eyes, but the eyes of our hearts can see the hope that Jesus offers to us. Like Mary, our pain and our hopelessness don't have to prevent us from seeing what's true, that Jesus really is alive and his love gives us. Let's pause right now to answer another question. What are some of the ways in life that Jesus can give us hope? I wonder what in your life right now might be making you feel some hopelessness. Maybe it's your circumstances. Maybe you feel right now like things are just going wrong and the whole world is crashing down around you. If that's you, remember what Mary discovered, that Jesus was with her before she even realized that he was there. He loves you so much that he is with you right now, even if you haven't noticed him yet. And let the love of Jesus give you hope. Maybe right now, doubts are making you feel hopeless. Maybe you're like Thomas from last week who we talked about, who said, I just feel like I can't believe this until I see it. I have doubts about who Jesus really is. Remember that Jesus also showed up for Thomas. Pray that God would open the eyes of your heart to see Jesus, that he is with you, even in the midst of your doubt. Let the love of Jesus give you hope. And finally, you might be feeling hopeless because of your own mistakes or bad decisions. Maybe some of the choices that you've made recently have left you feeling hopeless. Then the best and the most hopeful news of all might be for you today. That Jesus loved you so much that he allowed himself to die for you, to conquer sin, the wrong choices, the bad decisions that we've made, and death in our lives. His death and resurrection made a way for you to find freedom from sin and death, both in eternity and right now. And let that love of Jesus give you hope. Let's take a minute and answer this question. What is going on in your life right now, or maybe what's going on in the life of someone else that might be bringing some hopelessness? Guys, I hope that you have been reminded, I said hope, I hope that you've been reminded that Jesus' love gives us hope, even in the midst of dark circumstances. And what I would love for you to do right now is, as a small group, pray together and answer this question. This week, what's your next step? How can you find hope in Jesus this week? And how can you share that hope with others? Have a great week, you guys. I hope it's awesome. See you next week.